Hi everyone, welcome to part 3 of the Buddhist Scriptures recordings. So we see the conversation here continue on to something that was brought up in the first part, or the part where they discuss the idea of the chariot. This is the notion of personal identity and the implications that have for rebirth or reincarnation. So we know that in the Buddhist tradition, reincarnation is what occurs to you, although that not a personal identity sense of you as we've been discussing, but reincarnation is what occurs to something when it's not yet ready to ascend to nirvana. And so what we'll see here is King Melinda bring up the issue of rebirth with a pretty important question, which is, well, if there's no self, then what is it that gets reincarnated? Or if the person is enlightened, what is it that ascends to nirvana? And so what we'll see is Nagasena here explaining the concept of Dharma in the Buddhist religion or tradition. So Dharma is the word, I guess the best explanation we could give is the word that they use for the sort of karmic energy of the universe, this cosmic constant, this energy that flows through everything. And so we'll see Nagasena address this question to the king with 3 examples, or sort of 3 problems. So this is the idea of whether we are the same as we were when we were children. In other words, are you the same thing as you were when you were born? And the answer is no. You're very different to what you were when you were born. And so Nagasena will point out that the thing which draws you or links you to you when you were born is the Dharma, the karmic energy that flows through your person from birth to where you are now. King Melinda will ask for another example, and Nagasena will use what I think is the clearest example for Dharma in this section, which is the flame of a lamp. So Nagasena will talk about the idea of the flame of a lamp being lit at the beginning of the night, and is it the same flame as the one that is burning in the morning? So imagine a candle burning all night. Is this the same flame? No, not really. And so, but it's been continuous. It's been a constant, a constant presence right throughout the night. And so if you were watching the flame, at no point would you be able to see one flame die and another one begin. And so the link between these flames is seamless. We never see one end and another begin. And so this is a good, I think at least the clearest analogy that we get for what Dharma is. So Dharma is this seamless transition from one form to the next. And so this is how reincarnation occurs. At the point of death, your Dharma extinguishes and reignites in a new being instantaneously. And so your Dharma continues without you. And so this is why the self doesn't exist or continue to exist, but rather the Dharma does. And then the final example is the sort of the milk to ghee example. So they talk, Nagasena uses the example of milk being processed into curd and then butter and into ghee. And, is ghee the same as milk? Well, no, but they are intrinsically linked. So what is it that links all of these forms? Well, it is the Dharma. It is the cosmic energy, the karmic energy, that links milk to ghee, even though they are very different things. So let's continue on. We're going from right at the bottom of the page of 149. So there's an italicized subheading, Personal Identity and Rebirth. Highlighters at the ready, and here we go. The king asked, when when someone is reborn, Venerable Nagasena, is he the same as the one who just died, or is he another? The elder replied, he is neither the same nor another. Very clear there. Give me an illustration. What do you think, great king, when you were a tiny infant, newly born and quite soft, were you then the same as the one who is now grown up? No, that infant was one. I, now grown up, am another. So here King Milinda is presenting the idea that he's not the same person as he was when he was born. There's lots to back this. This might sound a little bit odd when you first hear it, but there's lots to back this up. Your consciousness wasn't present at your birth. You have no memories of your birth. Even people with eidetic memories or photographic memories don't remember their birth. You take up a different physical space than your birth. Assuming that you're over the age of 7, every single cell in your body has been replaced. And so physically, you are not the same as you were when you were born. King Milinda here is saying, well, no, I'm not the same as I was when I was born. And Nagasena continues, if that is so, then, great king, you have had no mother, no father, no teaching, and no schooling. Do we then take it that there is one mother for the embryo in the first stage, another for the second stage, another for the third, another for the fourth, another for the baby, another for the grown-up man? Is the schoolboy one person, and the one who has finished school another? Does one commit a crime, but the hands and feet of another are cut off? Certainly not. So here Nagasena is sort of... he's playing a bit of devil's advocate here, because King Milinda has given the right answer. He's not the same as he was when he was born. And Nagasena is saying, well, what could you possibly mean by this? Does this mean that you never went to school? Does this mean that you were never born? Does this mean you don't have a mother or a father? And the last example, if you commit a crime, is it someone else who gets punished? Because it's not happening instantaneously. Your punishment happens in the future. And so who's being punished then? And King Milinda says, certainly not. But what would you say, Reverend Sir, to all that? So he's putting it back on Nagasena to explain this. The elder replied, I was neither the tiny infant, newly born and quite soft, nor am I now the grown-up man, but all these are comprised in one unit depending on this very body. So, and here King Milinda asks for a simile, and this is where we move on to the lamp example. So here we've got Nagasena presenting this idea that personal identity doesn't exist. Simply by asking, well, are you the same person? You're implying a self. Otherwise, what is the you? So the only correct answer that can be given is, I was neither. I was neither the child that was born, nor am I the man standing before you now. Give me a simile. If a man were to light a lamp, could it give light throughout the whole night? Yes, it could. Is now the flame which burns in the first watch of the night the same as the one which burns in the second? It is not the same. Or is the flame which burns in the second watch the same as the one which burns in the last one? It is not the same. Do we then take it that there is one lamp in the first watch of the night, another in the second, and another again in the third? No, it is because of just that one lamp that the light shines throughout the night. Even so must we understand the collocation of a series of successive dharmas. At rebirth, so here this is Nagasena directly telling us about Buddhist perspective here, instead of using analogy or anything like that. So this is an important section, this next sentence. At rebirth, one dharma arises while another stops, but the two processes take place almost simultaneously. They are continuous. Therefore, the first act of consciousness in the new existence is neither the same as the last act of consciousness in the previous existence, nor is it another. So, before we move on to the milk analogy, the final one that King Milinda asks for, let's just talk about this idea of Dharma a little bit. So, just to be clear, this is, I know that I've said it already, but This is that karmic energy that flows through everything. All beings possess Dharma. The entire universe possesses Dharma. It is what ties us all together. But one Dharma links to another in almost a seamless way. And so at the moment of your death, assuming you haven't reached enlightenment, so your Dharma is not going to be absorbed by nirvana or return to nirvana, at the point of your death, your Dharma is going to extinguish and ignite simultaneously in a new being. Okay, and obviously depending on your actions will determine what being your Dharma gets reincarnated into. But we have to understand that that process of extinction and ignition happens instantly, so that there is no gap between the Dharmas. They're different, but the same. For me, the first time I read this, the first thing I thought about, oddly enough, there was an episode of Q&A where Richard Dawkins is talking about evolutionary biology, and they talk about the idea of, well, when did the first human come into existence? Evolutionary biology tells us that we evolved from one species into another, and eventually we arrived here at Homo sapien. So when was it? Who was the first Homo sapien? And Richard Dawkins basically explains that, well, there was never a first Homo sapien. At no point did, I'm not sure of, I think it was it Homo erectus, I believe, was our predecessor immediately before Homo sapien. But at no point did a Homo erectus mother give birth to a Homo sapien child. So there was never this separation. You can never say that this is when they ended and this is when Homo sapiens started. Instead, it was this gradual change. And so when you zoom out and you look at it as sort of a 100,000 year timeline, you go, okay, well, Homo erectus lasted this long, and this is about when Homo sapien became its own thing. But if you try and zoom in to that point doesn't exist. The extinction of Homo erectus and ignition of Homo sapien doesn't exist. How that occurred, it was a gradual process of evolution. And we're just now assigning that process different names. So I'm not sure if I'm clarifying or making things more complex here, but hopefully you're following along. And I think it's a good analogy for this idea of Dharma. This is the equivalent of saying, well, is my Dharma that exists within my body, is that the same or is that different of the Dharma from who I was reincarnated from? Well, it's neither. It's like saying, is this fossil Homo erectus or Homo sapien? Well, depending on its time period, it's neither and both. Your Dharma is not the same as it was in the last person, but it is. Okay, the extinction of the last person's Dharma and the ignition of your Dharma happened instantaneously. Okay, if it was lights being turned off and on, there would be no perceivable change in the light, but it will have changed. And so it's very confusing, and it's a very odd thing to think about, particularly because generally most of us have got a Western perspective of things like death and not reincarnation, but afterlife and that sort of stuff. But if you imagine this cosmic energy, this karmic energy flowing through all things, it makes sense that when one thing dies, that karmic energy will, extinguish. However, energy never extinguishes. And basic physics tells us this. Energy never leaves. It just transfers. And so, this is, for the Buddhists, this is Dharma. Your energy never extinguishes completely. It transfers. So at the point of extinction, it ignites again. I hope that's made it a little bit clearer. I'm not sure if it has or not, but hopefully it has. So let's have a look at the last simile that we get. So King Melinda it says, give me another simile. And Nagasena says, well, milk. Once the milking is done, milk, once the milking is done, turns after some time into curds. From curds, it turns into fresh butter, and from fresh butter, it turns into ghee. Would it now be correct to say that the milk is the same thing as the curds, or the fresh butter, or the ghee? No, it would not, but they have been produced because of it. Just so must be understood the collocation of a series of successive dharmas. So, what he's saying here, as far as I interpret it, is would I be right in saying that milk is the same thing as butter? No. But is it possible to have butter without milk? No. So there is an intrinsic link between these two things. They must be connected, even though they are not the same thing. So they are not the same thing, but they are totally reliant on each other. In this way, we can hopefully understand what Dharma is. Dharma is the link. It is the continuation. It's not the same as the milk, nor is it the same as the curd, but it is what draws the two together. It is what provides consistency between the two. So hopefully this has been clear enough, this idea of Dharma. So just to be clear, in this section we talked about personal identity and rebirth. It started off with a core question from King Melinda, and a pertinent one at that, which is, well, if there is no self, what gets reincarnated? And Nagasena is presenting the idea that what gets reincarnated is is your Dharma. Okay, so the karmic energy of the universe is what gets reincarnated. Okay, hopefully that's clear. We'll have one more recording for the last section, which is personal identity and karma, and we'll hear about why you shouldn't steal mangoes. Hope you have a good day. Bye.